Okay, so it's really important that I note that this video has a trigger warning because it talks about self-harm and psychosis. So if you are currently struggling with either of these things, or you just don't want to listen to it, or you feel like listening to it is not going to help your recovery, remission, progress, whatever you want to call it, don't watch. Yeah. Hi, welcome to my channel where I'll be talking all about mental health. I am a journalist for metro.co.uk where I write a lot about mental health, and I thought I'd start this channel because, well, one, because I think it'll be really beneficial to me to be able to talk about things, and also maybe anybody watching this will be able to relate. So yeah, I just thought it would be maybe a good idea. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. So I have 4 mental health diagnoses. I've been given 4 labels for my mind. I have bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, OCD and health anxiety. So health anxiety is like an anxiety that's also in the OCD spectrum, which in itself is an anxiety disorder. I'm going to be talking about all of these things and more mental health things over the next few weeks, but today I'm going to talk about being diagnosed with bipolar disorder for the first time, as this was my first diagnosis. So yeah, I hope you enjoy my story. So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in the early months of 2016. It didn't really come as a shock or a surprise because my mum has actually got bipolar disorder as well. And so bipolar can actually be hereditary, so it can be passed down. So when I was diagnosed, it wasn't like massive news to me. So I feel like that helped me come to terms with the diagnosis better. So throughout my teens, I'd been having sort of symptoms, but they'd often be sort of fobbed off for hormones because I was so young. But I got my definite diagnosis in 2016 after I had my first psychotic episode, which I'm gonna talk about. So yeah. So just to tell you a little bit about my diagnosis, I have bipolar disorder type 1, which means I have more manic episodes than depressive. So bipolar is generally made up of 3 categories, and that's mania, hypermania and depression. I've had depression a few times with the bipolar and it's been awful, but I have more manic episodes which are equally as awful at times. So when I'm manic, I will be very motivated, very driven. I'll have like a million ideas. I won't sleep. I'll run on next to no sleep, so say like 3 a.m. until 6 a.m. and then I'll wake up and then I'll be wide awake and ready for the day. Other times I'll not be able to sleep because I'll be having so many ideas in my head, and I will wake up and write them down in a notebook for the next morning, and so on and so on. As well as being motivated and driven, I make a lot of plans. I'm very impulsive. So once, which I'll probably talk about in another video, I got 18 tattoos in the space of 4 months. Spent a lot of money. That's another thing with mania, is spending. You spend a lot of money in a short space of time, generally on things you don't really need but in the moment have to have. And yeah, I also become very irritable and angry, and a lot of people don't know this about mania, that anger is a big part of it. You'd think it would be more depression, and it can be, but it's also a part of mania. So my anger is actually what led to me being diagnosed. So in the early months of 2016, I'm not 100% sure of the date, and I can't remember why this happened, but I had a huge argument with my boyfriend Angelo, and what happened was I completely lost it. Now, when I've lost it in the past, I've sort of been able to come down from it, or at least afterwards be able to comprehend what had happened, but this time was different. I completely lost my temper. We'd had this big argument. I became very verbally aggressive. I was screaming, and the screaming was different to how you generally scream when you're angry. It was like until my throat was raw, like screaming and screaming and screaming. I locked myself in the bathroom. I slumped down next to the door, still screaming, and I went lightheaded and nearly passed out. I then picked myself up, sat in an empty bathtub, and as I was screaming, started cutting my wrists over and over again with a razor. There was, I did it a lot, all up my arm, and by this time my boyfriend was very worried about me, and he kicked down the door and found me a mess. He cleaned me up, and I was so exhausted by this point that he just put me to bed and I fell asleep. So the next morning it was like nothing had happened for me. I woke up, I had a coffee, and I had literally no recollection of what had happened the night before. I mean, I knew I'd been angry, I knew I'd obviously self-harmed, but I couldn't remember anything that I'd said, like anything. And to me, I was just like, well, I just lost my temper, it's not a big deal, but obviously it was a big deal. My boyfriend was being really off with me, which I sort of expected because I'd been a nightmare the night before, and so I just kind of tried to get on with my morning. But then an hour later I heard my mum's voice from the next room, and I was like, why is my mum here? I thought maybe I'd made plans with her, because when I was manic I was making a lot of plans with people to do things and to take people places, and yeah, I'd made a lot of plans. So I was kind of thinking, oh god, maybe I've made these plans and I've completely forgotten. But that wasn't the case. She came into my bedroom, sat on the end of my bed, and looked very worried about me, very concerned, and she explained that Angelo had actually called her at 1 a.m. while I was having a while I was being a nightmare, and he was very worried about me, and he felt that I needed help, and she felt the same. Obviously I was a bit like, I don't need help because I think the problem is that when you have a mental illness and you have bipolar disorder, you don't really see it as a mental illness, you just see it as a part of your personality, and you think maybe you are just this really angry person, even though these are symptoms of a mental illness. And I didn't really want to go to the doctors because I didn't see the point, and I thought maybe he'd turn around and say I was just a young woman having hormonal problems, but that wasn't the case. I ended up going to the doctors just to give my mum and Angelo peace of mind, but when I got there and my mum explained what had happened, and she also explained that she had bipolar disorder and saw a lot of her symptoms in me, the first thing the doctor said was, yeah, you need help. And obviously I was quite taken aback because, yeah, I hadn't expected him to say that. I really did think that being angry was just a part of who I was. Anyway, I was really lucky. He gave me an emergency referral to a psychiatrist, and I just want to say that I know this is not generally normal. Like, some people can be waiting weeks, months, years for a referral. I was just very lucky. I don't know why, and it really sucks that some people do not get their referral for such a long time, and if I could do anything to change it, I would. As I said, I was just really lucky. I was really nervous about seeing the psychiatrist because I was expecting like a guy in a white jacket, like with a notepad and ready to take down my every move. So I was quite on edge when I went, but so 4 days later I did go. And what happened was he gave me a mental health assessment. So he was asking me questions about everything. My life, my relationship, my friendships, how I feel when I'm manic, my work life, my impulses, my spending, literally everything that could coincide with bipolar disorder, he asked me. And I was just very honest with him, and I said about the anger, and I said about losing control, because that's a massive part of mania, is losing control over anything. Even if it is your spending, you are losing a form of control. He was really great. He prescribed me quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic, and I took that for a week because he said, you need to come back because I cannot give you a definite diagnosis. I've only seen you once. I'm going to have to see you a few more times. And I understood, but he was looking more towards the bipolar diagnosis anyway, because obviously my mum had it and it's hereditary, so it kind of made sense. Anyway, I tried quetiapine for a week. It was great. Like, it was really great. It calmed me down. It was really helpful. I wasn't losing control so much, but I was still quite irritable and angry. And so I told him this when I went back the following week. And long story short, I was on quetiapine for a little while, and after a few more sessions I came back with a definite diagnosis of bipolar disorder, which was a relief, because even though I hadn't known it at the time, when I look back I was really struggling, and it's kind of sad that I did just think it was a part of who I was, because it made me feel like this really awful person. And after I had these meltdowns, I would feel such big feelings of guilt and shame, and it just made me feel somewhat ashamed of how I'd acted. And it was nice to know that, okay, I do have a mental illness, and the way I've acted is not who I am. I'm not a horrible person. They are just a consequence of mental illness that I need to seek help for, and now I've sought help and I'm on track of things. So yeah. So I've been diagnosed with bipolar now for the past 2 years. And in that time I've tried a lot of medication. I actually came off the quetiapine because it made me gain a lot of weight that I'm still trying to diet away, but it's not really happening because I cannot stop eating McDonald's and cheesecake, so I will probably get there eventually, I hope. Anyway, that's not something I need to focus on right now. So yeah, I came off quetiapine, and since then I have been on Abilify and risperidone, which are antipsychotics. I settled on chlorpromazine, which is actually an old school antipsychotic which they don't tend to prescribe anymore, which is really great. Like, it's really good. I've also been on lithium, which is a mood stabilizer, and I settled on lamotrigine, which is another mood stabilizer, because lithium gave me the shakes, which wasn't very nice. I also take promethazine for anxiety and propranolol for anxiety, and I also take sertraline for OCD, which is an antidepressant. So like, people with bipolar disorder aren't really supposed to be on antidepressants, so they have to level it out, because an antidepressant can send you into a manic episode, so I have to have the antipsychotics and mood stabilizers alongside it so that I'm stable, which I am. I have now been stable with bipolar disorder for nearly a year now. I had a manic episode again last year. I was under the crisis team, which is basically an emergency mental health team for people with mental illness to make sure that they're not a danger to themselves. So I was under them for a week. But since then my meds have been upped, they've been changed so much so that I've got like a good combination and I am stable. What I haven't been stable with, however, is my OCD and health anxiety. The past couple of months, December and January, have been really bad. I had a really nasty bout of health anxiety, but I'm going to be talking about that next week in my next video. And I'll be putting up videos every Sunday, I think. This might change. I'm very new to YouTube still, so don't quote me on this. It may change in the future, but hopefully not. Hopefully it'll be every Sunday, because I'm thinking everybody likes to just chill out and watch TV on Sunday, so maybe if you have 5 minutes, well, maybe longer than 5 minutes depending on how long this video is, then maybe you can watch and relate. And yeah, so yeah, that's me done, I think. I don't know how to end videos. I'm very awkward in front of the camera. If you haven't realised, hopefully I will get better at this as time goes on. But yeah, I will see you next Sunday.